Wow, what a great day this has been. We started National Intern Day with Congressman Seth Moulton. Then we had an invigorating fireside chat with Senator Tim Scott. If that wasn't cool enough, we had the directors of an award-winning Sundance film come chat one-on-one about Boys State, public service, and how different careers get started. You know, we have a private concert coming up soon, but before we get to that, I wanted to make sure to introduce you to some of the best powerhouses here in DC. They are all so kind to College to Congress. Many of them are on our Corporate Leadership Council, where they donate their time, their expertise, and their resource to our organization. And I'm very excited to get to chat with them today. We have Chris Jones, who's the Vice President of Government Relations for Fox. Chris, you can wave your hand so we can all see you. We have Annie Policastro, who is also a Vice President of Federal Government Relations over at UPS. So if you've been doing a ton of Amazon shopping like I have, you can thank her for getting your boxes to you. We have my dear friend Malcolm, who is a Government Affairs Senior Associate at Glover Park Group. And of course, if you're already on C2CU, then you're familiar with Tom Manitos, who is working as a Vice President at Spotify. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. So
Thanks for having us.
Yes, of course. To get it kicked off, I'd love to give you each, a couple minutes to talk about your roles at your organization and what a typical day-to-day looks like. Of course, we'll go ladies first. So Annie, can you get us kicked off?
Sure. So one of my primary roles as a Vice President of Government Relations is to be a bridge between the business leaders at UPS and the members of Congress and the administration and the policymakers here in DC. So a lot of my role is twofold. I share information both from the business leaders to policymakers as they consider various policies on the Hill. And then I also report back what various lawmakers are doing in DC to our business leaders so they can prepare for new laws and regulations and things that are going to be impacting our drivers and our employees and our customers.
Very cool. And we'll make sure to dig into more of that later. Chris Jones, so you have been involved with College to Congress the last 2 years. I know this is very near and dear to your heart. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing at Fox and what the typical day-to-day looks like?
Sure, thanks, Audrey. The typical day-to-day has changed a lot in the last 4 months. I have the distinct pleasure of representing a bunch of different businesses owned by Fox, from sports to news to entertainment. I've been there for about 10 years, and before March, a typical day involved, starting out in the office and then spending the rest of your day on Capitol Hill, walking the halls of Congress and meeting with staffers and members face to face, followed by maybe a fundraising type dinner at the evening, probably not different from what Annie, Tom, and Malcolm's days look like either. Post-COVID, our days look a lot like this. It's Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call, which adds a little bit of impersonal nature to the business. But we're all trying to, I think, be as flexible as we can and figure out how to navigate this new virtual world.
Yeah, adapt and pivot. I feel like that's the theme of 2020. Really just make the best of your situation. Malcolm Sherrod, you and I met, I think, a year and a half ago, but when you found out about College to Congress, you came all in. I wanted to make sure to have you on this panel because you have a different view and perspective because you're working with the Glover Park Group, which I know also has some exciting news themselves, but you have multiple clients because you're not working for just one corporation. So can you share what that looks like and what the difference is between maybe Chris or Tom or Annie's job?
Sure. Thanks, Audrey. So I have the pleasure of working at the Glover Park Group, as you said, and our exciting news is that we'll soon be affectionately referred to as Finsbury Glover Hearing and a merger between two of our partner firms. But at the Glover Park Group, we're a multi-purpose client firm where I get the chance of working with folks like Tom and Chris, and we are, their consultants. And many of them have their own issues that they have to address themselves with members of Congress. We work as more of an intel gathering and also as an advocacy arm of theirs. So we work as a team on a number of their issues. So thankfully, having that opportunity, I get to work on a lot of different things from day to day. I get to kind of work with a lot of different members across industries and verticals. So it kind of gives me more of a broad range of activity. Like Chris said, a lot of our work now is definitely via Zoom. But prior to COVID, I will spend many of my days on the Hill, kind of bobbing around committee room to committee room, meeting with different staffers on different issue areas. So it allows me a broad range of activities every day.
Very neat. I think all your jobs sound so much fun, and I know it's very different now as we're all stuck behind these screens. For our viewers who have yet to see my interview of Tom, we just did that 2 weeks ago, and it was all about networking post-COVID. How do you network in this digital age? We also dived a little bit into his job, but for those who weren't able to see it, Tom, could you share a little bit about yours as well?
Sure, happy to do it. Thanks again for having me. I think Annie and Chris described perfectly what an in-house lobbyist does. And then those of us that are in-house lobbyists rely on folks like Malcolm at our outside firms to help us do that job. So whether we're communicating upstream to corporate, or we're on the Hill, along with our partners like Malcolm, our outside firms, I think there's one key to remember for at least an in-house lobbyist, we're probably the only part of the business that's not making the business any money. So we almost have to like punch above our weight, show our worth every day to headquarters to show that this function is valuable, that this function helps the bottom line in terms of intelligence, in terms of less regulation or a different law that could help the bottom line and help the business move forward. So whether that's, and one thing that I was very surprised about when I first started this job is the amount of time I'm on internal calls, just learning about the business, learning about new products, relaying information to different parts of the business all around the globe is extremely large amount of my time, where I'll look up, and I have been on Capitol Hill in a couple of weeks even. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, we're all at much different sized corporations. I'm one of only 4 people that do government affairs globally for a company, where I'm sure my colleagues here on Zoom have many, many more people than that. So I've got to cover more area. So I'm not able to be on the Hill as much on the internal side. So it can fluctuate to the point when 2 years ago, when we had a bill that was moving through Congress that was eventually signed by the president, I was on the Hill every day. So it can vary widely.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you brought up that distinction, because one of the things I think is so neat about government affairs is the job is not the same across companies, across industries. It can be so specialized. It can really, you can figure out like what are your strengths and how do you use them to do the best you can do. And like Tom mentioned, yes, it's not a revenue generating department, but you better believe that you guys constantly find out how to save your company's money. So it is just as valuable. Of course, today we are celebrating National Intern Day. So we got to talk about internships. I know that our panel has a couple different experiences with how they got to where they are. We have people like Tom who are Hill veterans and spent nearly a decade working for the speaker. And then we have Chris, who just jumped into government relations. And I know Malcolm and Annie, you both interned, but then didn't go on to be full-time staff, realized that this is where you wanted to be. So I'd love to just kind of hear in your own words, how did you get to where you are? Chris, I'd love to start with you, since this is just, it's obviously a different pathway than what C2CU currently offers, but nonetheless, I think it's such a needed one. And during COVID, it's the private sector that's hiring. And so I think it's really great for our students to consider, you know, what you did and how they could replicate it.
Sure, thanks. Look, I think part of my passion for College to Congress and the reason why Fox has been so supportive of this organization over the years comes from my lack of having worked on Capitol Hill. When I moved to Washington, D.C., I did not have, you know, a Capitol Hill benefactor, someone who was working in Congress, either as a member or as a staffer, who, you know, brought me in and showed me around. I started out at a law firm working as a paralegal. I joined a trade association, the National Association of Broadcasters, which is the chief advocacy organization for television stations. And I was there for 6 years, and that's how I got introduced to the team at Fox 10 years ago, and joined that group on their government relations side. So really, for me, I think it's kind of the lack of Hill experience that makes me such a positive advocate for College to Congress going forward.
Yeah, thank you. And we are so grateful for both your support and Fox support over the years. So thank you for sticking with us as we continue to grow. Annie, I'd love to hear about your internship and how it either taught you what you did or didn't want to do, which is just as valuable sometimes.
Yeah, so I didn't have the opportunity to come to DC. It wasn't an option. I needed to keep my summer job between college years. So I ended up doing an internship with my member of Congress in the district office. I think it was a great experience. I got to learn a lot about what district offices do and how they are so important to representing the member and getting in touch and having that daily contact with constituents. So it was a great experience. I think the thing I learned was you really have to take the opportunities you're given and go, all out. So while it wasn't the glamorous Hill internship I thought it was going to be, I was able to use the people that I met in that internship. And when I was looking for a job my senior year, I made a trip out to DC. I knew 2 people. And through one of those 2 people, I actually ended up finding an opportunity to work at UPS. And I've been at UPS for 8 years. So I think it goes to show that, you're dealt the cards you have. You got to play your hand. And I think what is really important is being a hard worker and knowing that, you only get so many opportunities. And I think luck plays a role in a lot of our careers, but you really got to back it up with hard work. So being willing to do, whatever task you're given, I think is really crucial. I also think, I didn't have 10 years on the Hill, which a lot of people might tell you need to do before you can be a lobbyist. I am always skeptical when someone tells you they need to do their exact career path. So I think, there are a lot of ways to get to a job you love. And I think finding out along the way the things that you really like and really enjoy, things you excel at, are going to help you do that. And of course, networking along the way is always important. Both with mentors and then among your peers is always very helpful.
I couldn't agree more. And to plug the conversation Tom and I had again, we addressed this and Tom said, I've had 10 years, it doesn't mean you have to. Everyone has their own path, and just depending on the strategy that you use and really what your passions are and what you want to follow, you can make it work. So I couldn't agree more. I'm going to open this question to everyone. Just raise your hand if you want to take it first. One of the questions I always hear from our students is, they get to DC or maybe they're researching DC and they just see so many acronyms and titles and GR and GA and PA and lobbying versus advocacy, and why are so many people scared to say a lobbyist versus an advocate? There's a lot of minutia that's kind of going on, and I just want to help demystify what this all means. So if you guys could just help me explain in a really easy way, what are kind of the differences and which ones are really just multiple names for the same job?
Well, I'll take on the government affairs side. So I think, and guys, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are 3 buckets you need to look at government affairs. You have the trade association, which Chris and I started at, which is a organization representing a certain part of industry. So in Chris's case, it was all the broadcasters. I was at the trade association representing all the internet companies. There's the Sand and Gravel Trade Association. There's we're the Trade Association capital of Washington, D.C. But there are all these different groups that are representing an interest. So you've got to understand all these different members, company members, and represent their position to the Congress or to the executive branch. Then you have in-house lobbyists that work for a corporation like the 3 of us. And then you have contract lobbyists like Malcolm and many different firms in town that either are hired by a trade association or an in-house lobbyist to help them influence the government.
Yeah, I think that's right, Tom. One thing I would add to that, and Audrey touched upon this. A lot of the words that we see are, pretty key words here: government affairs, public affairs, advocacy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of them are pretty much the same. I like to see our role less so in a negative connotation of, the bad lobbyist, and it's more so an educating factor when it comes to policy. Oftentimes, we are delivering information to policymakers about what our companies or our clients are doing. And we're also relaying that information back to our clients and companies in-house, and just making sure everyone's pretty much on the same page. And also understand what an issue area, a policy or a law that's being considered can do to that company or corporation or industry for the trade association people, and vice versa, what that does for the member or senator and for their constituency. So it's oftentimes really getting everybody on the same page and kind of connecting the dots more so than it is, representing something that some people may feel more passionate or emotional towards.
That's such a helpful breakdown. And, as you and Tom were talking, I could just visualize this map of what is the different in the different routes. And I'm going to make sure my team creates that visual map that we can drop on our Instagram at College to Congress for the visual learners out there like me that need to see it to really internalize it. Malcolm, you touched on something that I was actually curious about, getting your take on. And it is the fact that lobbying often does have this negative connotation around it. I think, history buffs correct me, but I think it goes back to the 60s when people used to actually stand in hotel lobbies and try to catch members as they went out the door. What we all know is that you play a vital role in the lawmaking process, oftentimes representing people who need to be advocated on behalf of, who can't fly here, advocating on your companies and all their employees. With a global pandemic like what's happening now, I'm hearing you're just busier than ever, ensuring that your companies get PPP, that people don't have to do massive layoffs. I'm curious to hear your take on maybe some of the really positive things you do and the things that you're most proud of when you think about your job and the impact you're having. Would someone like to take that first?
I'll go ahead. I think, there's a negative connotation, but I think you really need to, it's been played up more in movies than what really exists day to day. And I think, some of the things that we do, it's really recognizing that there are people on the Hill that have these intentions with their policy making, and they have the best of intentions, but they just don't have that real world experience to know what their policies are going to look like in the real world. So marrying that intention for a public policy like infrastructure with a company or an interest that really understands and lives it day to day, and making sure that everyone has the same expectations for what that policy is going to look like in the real world. So, for example, UPS has trucks on the road every day, and I think everyone agrees and would be happy to have less congestion. And sometimes what we have to do is put more trucks on the road because some areas are so congested. Obviously, that's not what we want to do, and it's not great for the environment, and we'd love to make areas less congested. So we partner with members of Congress and say, these are the top 10 bottlenecks that we see, and let's try and attack those for the betterment of society and for our company. So I think it's just marrying the policymakers and good intentions with, companies that have an interest and a stake in public policy outcomes. And I just think sometimes there are extremes that get portrayed in the media about what a lobbyist's intentions are. But at the end of the day, it's really about, I think, the individuals and their own personal integrity. And that's why integrity and ethics in this profession is so key, because you might be able to get some short-term success by, misrepresenting an issue or a policy, but you're not going to have that trust and that relationship that you need to have continued success in DC. So I think really, and it's a sad connotation, because I think, without integrity, this profession is not going to be a successful one for you. If you're trying to, cheat or get around the rules, it's not going to end well.
I think that's spot on. I think trust is absolutely the most important asset a lobbyist can have. I'm not afraid of the term lobbyist. Personally, I find no offense to it. I do find myself in a lot of lobbies from time to time. So, but Annie is exactly right. Trust and integrity is the most important part of our job. You know, it takes years to build a reputation in Washington. It takes seconds to ruin that reputation. And that's something that, as Annie said, you know, you can play fast and loose and you can have quick success, but if you're gonna be around this town for a long time, you're gonna have to continually approach everything with trust. You mentioned, you know, what are some of the things that we do or that we take pride in. At Fox, you know, television is something that a lot of people just sort of take for granted. They push a button on their remote and it comes on. It's not unlike, you know, being able to listen to any song you want in the world or having the package delivered to you instantly. It's an industry that is just taken for granted. And one of the things I find myself doing as the lobbyist for Fox is often taking members of Congress and staffers actually sort of into the bowels of a production and letting them see how many people, how much technology, how much investment goes into bringing a baseball game from Nats Park into the living rooms of televisions across America. And that effort, you know, takes countless employees, really smart engineers, really smart producers, and then just a ton of innovation. Here in the COVID era right now, you know, we're bringing baseball back to America, and ESPN is too, but Fox will actually deploy virtual fans into the stands for this 60-game baseball season. It won't be without controversy. There will be people that love it and people that don't like it. And just, you know, this is literally an innovation of the last 3 months, and not something that comes cheap and not something that comes easily. And being able to walk a member of Congress through and let them see exactly who did it and how they did it, I think resonates the next time you go in and make, you know, a public policy argument on how or why regulation is good or bad for your industry.
If I could jump in too, I think just Chris, I hope you guys eliminate the wave in virtual games because I hate the wave. But I think Chris is exactly right. Showing members of Congress and government officials how things work is so key, especially representing a technology company now and in the past. I think we've collectively been a bit embarrassed by members of Congress and their lack of understanding of technology that's been shown at some of the hearings, which is a failure on lobbyists. There are not enough of us. There are not enough of us educating members of Congress that might not have used the technology themselves or grew up using it. And so it's harder for them to understand. It's a foreign concept. They often refer to their grandkids teaching them. That's up to us who do this work so that they can better understand it, so that they can regulate it correctly. They can write laws correctly to protect not only consumers and their voters, but also American companies. So an example that I was involved with at Spotify is because of the rise of streaming, we weren't able to find out how to pay songwriters, all the songwriters in the world are writing all these songs and putting them up on our services. So we helped Congress write and pass a bill that created a clearinghouse. So all songwriters in the world can register their works in one nonprofit that the streaming services are paying for, that then we report our music to each month, and everyone gets paid and all the money flows to the correct folks. And that took, you know, passing the first copyright bill in 20 years out of Congress, but it took a Herculean effort of lobbyists all across the music industry, all across the entertainment industry, to get their bosses and their companies to sign on, to convince them to support this. And even with unanimous support almost throughout the industry, it still barely passed Congress, even though there's a unanimous vote in the House and a unanimous vote in the Senate. So it takes a lot of effort and things just don't happen. It's easier to stop something from happening than making something happen. And it takes folks in this industry to do so in a trustworthy and honest and ethical way.
It's really interesting as I'm listening to, you know, the places in your positions where you find the most pride. It also resonates with the conversation we had for C2CU earlier this week with a bunch of Hill staffers, where, you know, they think, oh, the senator introduces a bill and they go on the news and people see it and you don't hear about it for a long time. And people ask us, what are you doing up there? But really, I mean, they're working hand in hand with you. They're hearing from their constituents. There's so much that goes into it. And I think this is why conversations like this are so important, because it really starts to peel the layers back and help us understand, how difficult these decisions are to make, what is needed, but then how helpful they are. I mean, you're all problem solving in your own way. Chris, as you were chatting, I was actually wondering if you were listening to our conversation earlier with Congressman Seth Moulton, because he was talking about the importance of teams, and he doesn't look at his congressional staff as staff. He calls them his team, and a lot of that comes from his Marine Corps background, and he takes the same amount of pride for the same reasons that you do in your job. It's great when it looks easy. It's great that people take it for granted in the sense that they don't realize, what's happening behind the scenes, but it's almost what you want. You want things to seem seamless. And I will say, I too bought my little head cutout to represent the Tampa Bay Rays, waiting for the Nats to let me put my face up there too. I got my dog in it. So I love that idea. I love the creativity behind that. So seriously, bravo. Thinking of COVID and just all the changes that we've had to make, there's one person that I really admired, what he's done through this, and that's Malcolm. And just for, everyone's awareness, when stay-at-home orders first went into place, and, I think we've all been at home since about March, if not early April, Malcolm did what I think any great lobbyist would do. He made sure to still relay information and communicate with his friends, his colleagues, people on the Hill, the groups that he works with. And I thought it was really interesting how he did it. So Malcolm, I just wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about that. What could our students learn about staying connected and continuing to communicate even from your home?
Sure. Thanks for highlighting that. One of the things I quickly realized when I knew we would be home for the foreseeable future is that we would miss out on the big DC factor of just seeing one another. Oftentimes, as the other panelists have kind of referred to, we are all on the Hill. You were all at the same receptions. We were at the same meetings. So you get the chance to organically run into friends, colleagues, and other people in your network, and just relay information, pretty fairly and easily without having to, touch base so formal. But as we were all quarantined at home, I realized that big factor was kind of missing in my life. And I didn't have the same opportunity to kind of touch base with friends and other people that are just, really helpful from day to day and help us do our job, help us keep the flow of information going. So I thought it would be a great way to kind of just do a simple wellness check on a lot of people. Thankfully, a lot of those that we work with are our friends through work and outside of work. So we do really care about them. So I did want to just say hi and touch base. And I realized at the same time, there was tons of information that was being flown around that would affect many of the clients that we worked for, friends and family. You've touched upon it at the beginning, but COVID has really been something that struck home for many of us in more ways than we realized, whether that was paycheck protection programs, PPE, just simple information about the disease as we were still knowing this is an evolving thing, and we really don't know much about it. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of keep that flow of information going. Thankfully, it was well received. I did it in a way where I could bring together some of the resources that we were working with at Glover Park Group and monitoring many of the information that, Tom alluded to that we help our clients with, and just making sure that they know exactly all what's happening on the Hill, packaging that up in a way that I thought was authentic to myself and in my own voice, and kind of keeping that story going, just to touch base with a lot of our friends and colleagues and family in a way nightly and recently, not as frequently as I did in the beginning, but pretty often, just to make sure they know that I'm still here, but also so I know that they're still there, and we can keep that organic as much as possible, normal life before COVID still going in this time.
It's even crazy that we refer to things as, pre-COVID and post-COVID. Yeah. I mean, this is something that's almost become normal for us all. And I just know that any sort of stream of normalcy in communications is often helpful. So I really applaud your efforts there. Yeah. We are closing soon. Before we did, Chris was kind enough to share, you know, why he loves College to Congress, why Fox has been supportive. Annie, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot a bit. I know you're one of our most loyal volunteers and member of our Corporate Leadership Council. Just wanted to hear in your own words what this program means to you and why you're a part of it.
Yeah, like I said at the outset, I didn't have the opportunity to come to DC for an internship experience, though I would have loved it. But I think the tools that C2C provides to the interns and the education that goes into that is that it's not just getting someone's foot in the door, it's really preparing them for success through that experience and setting them up for success in a way that a lot of people are privileged to have in other ways. They might have a mentor or very connected parents that have set them up similarly, but it's just not in the cards for a lot of people. And I think, you know, that combination of helping open doors, but then also making sure that once you cross that threshold, that you're prepared for success is really important to me. And I just think that you guys do such a good job making a thoughtful curriculum. And I want to work with folks that have gone through this training because I know that they're coming out the other end prepared for, you know, the rigors of what working in DC can be like sometimes.
And it can surely be tough at times. I think we're all being tried right now and making sure, you know, we're putting our best foot forward every day. We have ended every session today on a positive note. I'd love to invite you guys to help me do that today. Whether it's words of encouragement or just a quick piece of advice, I'd love to just hear what you have to share with our students. We can start with Tom, go to Malcolm, Annie, and end on Chris.
Sure. Thanks again for having me, Audrey. Really appreciate it. And thanks for all the great work you guys do to College Congress. I'll do a piece of advice for anyone starting their career. Show up early, stay late, work hard, which Annie said earlier, and pay attention to detail. And those two, especially working hard and paying attention to detail in your work product, has seemed to make a great recipe for success for people in DC.
Malcolm, would you like to share a piece of advice or an anecdote or something for our interns to take home with them?
Yes, I love to. Thanks for having me. Also, Audrey, this has been such a great time, and I really enjoy having an opportunity to speak to many of the students here watching. The best thing I can offer anyone is to make sure that you know who your friends are in DC, who your friends are that you work with. Connectivity and networking is so important here. You've done such a great job, Audrey, in making sure that the College to Congress network is very strong, and it's one that we can call upon at all times. It's something that would be really important as you continue your journey here in DC. Please feel free to reach out to us here on the Leadership Council, who are always willing to lend a hand and make sure that we can leave that door open behind us. So best of luck to you, and make sure that you don't hesitate to ask for help.
Yeah, if I could just share a piece of advice, I think, you know, like Tom said, it's really important to be observant, to be paying attention to the things around you. I think you can learn so much by just picking up on body language and remembering things by being present and observing what's going on around you. It can really make you be a better team player. And I think that the working hard, staying late, I also think, you know, so many times there are so many opportunities to network. And I remember having interns that wanted to leave early to go to some networking reception. And it just, you know, if you have the best advocates for you, the people that you work for, they're going to be the strongest advocates for you if you do a good job, and they are going to want to help you in further your career. So I think really taking the time to do a good job for doing a good job at the job you have is really key to building a career in DC.
I love that. Don't think too far ahead. Make sure you're present and doing a good job in the moment. Chris, can you close us out?
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. I think everything everyone has already said is great. I would just say Washington can be a really overwhelming place when you get here. There's a lot of people, a lot of places to be, and a lot of places you feel like you need to be. I've always been a believer that you don't need a ton of friends. You just need a few really good ones in order to be successful in Washington. I will take a small band of really trusted friends over the largest coalition of acquaintances any day of the week. And many times those friends are your bosses are your former bosses. And to Annie's point, those are going to be the people that help advance your career moving forward. So do the good, put in all the time you can now.
Wow, well, you heard it here first. This was certainly a powerhouse panel. You guys did not disappoint. I knew you won it. It is so clear to me, and I'm sure all of our viewers today, why you're dominating your industries. And I just so appreciate you taking that time to really give back and to help others. This really wraps it up for National Intern Day. We are about to debut a private concert with a platinum selling artist, Lauren Elena. We're just gonna do a quick 5-minute break and we'll see you here shortly.